The studio lights were hot and bright, but KeanuReeves sat quietly in his chair, hands resting loosely in his lap, eyes calm like still water. He had been invited to Joe Rogan's show not because he needed promotion, not because he wanted fame, but because the producers thought his humility would make for a good contrast. To Joe's blunt style, the crowd buzzed with excitement. Cameras rolled. The opening laughter faded as Joe leaned forward with a smirk. "You know, Keanu," Joe began, "I've always thought you were kind of overrated. I mean, yeah, people like you, but let's be honest, you've never been the best actor in the room. You're just Keanu." There was a pause. The audience chuckled nervously, unsure if it was meant as a joke. Joe sipped his drink, waiting for a reaction. The air tightened. Keanu didn't flinch. He didn't frown, didn't fire back. He just looked at Joe with those same patient eyes, the kind that had seen grief, joy, and the weight of living. He could have defended himself. He could have listed his work, the years of dedication, the sacrifices. But he didn't. Instead, he leaned slightly forward, his voice low and steady. "Maybe," he said, "but I hope I'm never overrated as a human being." The silence that followed was heavy, almost electric. Joe blinked, caught off guard. The crowd shifted, their faces changing from amusement to something softer, deeper. It was like the whole room had been reminded of something they had forgotten, that kindness was a form of greatness too. Joe laughed awkwardly, trying to push the conversation forward, but something in his expression had changed. It wasn't anger. It was something closer to respect. Though he didn't admit it out loud, as the interview went on, Keanu didn't speak much about himself. Instead, he told stories about others, the crew members who worked harder than anyone, the strangers who had shown him unexpected kindness, the fans whose letters had helped him through dark days. His words painted pictures of real lives, small acts of goodness that would never make headlines but mattered more than fame. At one point, Joe leaned back and said, "You really don't care about all the Hollywood stuff, do you?" Keanu smiled faintly. "Hollywood isn't home. People are." But the story didn't end with that interview. The audience didn't know was that someone watching at home, a young man in a small apartment across the city, was sitting on the edge of his bed, holding his phone, tears in his eyes. He had been ready to give up on himself. He had felt invisible, unimportant. But hearing Keanu say those words, "I hope I'm never overrated as a human being," made something shift inside him. It was like a light in a dark tunnel. That young man would later write to Keanu, and that letter would change everything. Asterisk 2. Weeks after the interview, Keanu was back in his quiet home. Small place filled with books, old photographs, and the faint scent of coffee. He had no assistant to filter his mail. He liked to open it himself. Most letters were fan notes, drawings from kids, or thank you cards. But one plain white envelope caught his eye. There was no return address, just a single name written in shaky handwriting, -Daniel. Keanu slid it open carefully. The paper inside was creased, the ink smudged in places, as if the writer had hesitated or cried while writing. "Dear Keanu," it began, "you don't know me, and I don't expect you to. My name is Daniel. I watched you on Joe Rogan's show last week. I don't watch much TV, but my neighbor told me to see it. I was having a bad night. Honestly, I was having a bad life. I've been feeling like there's no reason to keep going. I don't have family anymore, and I lost my job last year. I feel like nothing I do matters. But when you said you hoped you were never overrated as a human being, I don't know, it just hit me. I've been chasing the wrong things. I've been judging my worth by what I can do or what I have instead of who I am. For the first time in months, I went outside and talked to my neighbor. I'm not saying I'm okay now, but I think maybe I can try again. Thank you for reminding me that being human is enough." Keanu sat still, reading the words. Twice. Outside his window, the afternoon light shifted. But inside, he felt something heavy and real. He'd received thousands of letters over the years, but this one was different. It wasn't about a movie or a photo or an autograph. It was about survival. He placed the letter on the table and stared at it for a long time. He didn't know Daniel's last name. He didn't know where the man lived. But he felt like he knew him, not in the way you know someone's details, but in the way you recognize a soul carrying weight. For the rest of the day, Keanu couldn't stop thinking about him. He wondered if Daniel was eating, if he had someone to talk to, if the light in his apartment was as dim as the words in his letter suggested. Later that night, as he sat by the small desk in his bedroom, Keanu picked up a pen. He had no address to send a reply to, but he began to write anyway. Dear Daniel, you may never read this, but I want to tell you, you matter. Not for what you do, not for what you own, not for the number of people who know your name. No. Matter because you exist. Because you can still choose to be kind in a world that often isn't. And because even if life has taken much from you, you still have the power to give something no one else can yourself. He stopped, the ink pooling at the tip of the pen. There was no way to send it. Still, he folded the letter and placed it in his desk drawer. He didn't know it yet. But fate had already started working to bring Daniel and Keanu face to face. *3. Days later, Keanu was walking through downtown Los Angeles. He liked to go without security, wearing a worn black jacket and a baseball cap pulled low. People sometimes recognized him, but he didn't mind. He preferred real conversations. Overstaged appearances. It was a gray afternoon, the kind of day when the city felt slower, like it was catching its breath. Keanu had just stepped out of a small coffee shop. When he saw a man sitting on the curb near the bus stop, the man's clothes were clean but worn thin. His hands were clasped together, his eyes fixed on the ground. There was a paper bag beside him, and his posture carried the quiet heaviness of someone who didn't expect to be noticed. Keanu didn't know why, but something in his chest stirred. He walked closer. "Hey," he said gently, "you okay?" The man looked up, startled. His eyes were tired, but there was something familiar about them, a kind of depth that comes from fighting battles no one else can see. "I'm fine," the man replied, though his voice didn't sound convincing. Keanu crouched down so they were at eye level. "Mind if I sit for a minute?" The man hesitated, then nodded. They sat in silence at first, the noise of passing cars filling the gaps. Then Keanu said, "You remind me of someone who wrote me a letter recently." The man's eyes flickered. "A letter?" "Yeah," Keanu said softly. "Someone named Daniel." The man's breath caught. His lips parted slightly like he wanted to speak, but couldn't find the words. "That was me," he whispered. Keanu felt a stillness settle over the moment. He hadn't expected this. Not here, not by chance on a city street. "I didn't think you'd ever read it," Daniel said, his voice shaking. I had to tell someone. I didn't think it would matter." "It mattered," Keanu said firmly. "More than you know." Daniel's hands trembled slightly. "I was going to, end things that night before I saw your interview. Then you said that thing about not being overrated as a human being. I thought, maybe I've been wrong about my own worth." Keanu swallowed, his throat tight. "Daniel, you're still here. That's worth more than anything." A bus rumbled up to the stop, but Daniel didn't move. Neither did Keanu. "Do you have somewhere to be?" Keanu asked. Daniel shook his head slowly. "Not really. I just walk around, find a place to sit. It's easier than being in my apartment alone." Keanu stood, then held out his hand. "Come on, let's go get something to eat." Daniel blinked. "Seriously? Seriously?" Keanu said, smiling faintly. "Unless you've got better plans than a free burger." As they walked side by side toward a small diner down the block, Daniel glanced over at him. "Why are you doing this?" "I'm just some guy you met on the street." Keanu looked ahead, his voice steady. "You're not just some guy. You're Daniel. And sometimes people just need to be reminded they're not invisible." What neither of them knew was that this small meal would lead to a moment that would make headlines, but not for the reasons people would expect. The diner was a quiet place, the kind of spot where the air smelled faintly of fresh coffee and grilled onions. A bell above the door rang as they walked in. A waitress with tired eyes and a warm smile greeted them, leading them to a booth in the back. Daniel slid into the seat slowly, almost as if he wasn't sure he belonged there. Keanu sat across from him, his cap still low over his forehead. The waitress handed them menus, but Keanu barely glanced at his. "Get whatever you want," Keanu said. "Don't hold back." Daniel gave a half smile, though there was still hesitation in his eyes. "I can't remember the last time someone told me that." The waitress came back with 2 glasses of water. Daniel ordered a cheeseburger and fries. Keanu ordered the same. As they waited, Keanu leaned forward. "Can I ask you something?" Daniel nodded. Double quotes, "What did you do before all this?" "Before things got hard?" Daniel took a breath. "I worked at a print shop. Nothing glamorous. Paid the rent, and the place closed, and I couldn't find anything else. One thing led to another, and here I am." The days just blur together now. Keanu listened carefully, didn't interrupt, didn't try to fix it with easy answers. Instead, he said, "Sounds like you carried a lot alone." "I guess I did," Daniel replied. "After a while, you start to think maybe you're not worth carrying." The food arrived, and for a while, the conversation slowed as they ate. But Keanu noticed Daniel eating like he hadn't had a real meal in days, not rushed, but savoring every bite. After they finished, Daniel sat back, a little more relaxed than before. "You know, I didn't think much about that interview until I saw it again online. Someone had clipped the part where you said that thing about being human. People were sharing it everywhere." Keanu nodded slowly. Words travel, sometimes further than we realize. But then, something unexpected happened. A man at the counter, tall and broad-shouldered, stood up and walked over to their booth. He looked at Daniel first, then at Keanu. "Are you KeanuReeves?" he asked. Keanu smiled faintly. "Yeah." The man shook his head slowly. "Saw that clip too. Made me call my dad after 2 years of not speaking. Just wanted to say thanks." He walked away without another word, leaving Daniel staring at Keanu in disbelief. "You didn't even know him." "That's the thing about kindness," Keanu said quietly. "You don't need to know someone for it to matter." When they stepped out of the diner, the sun was setting. The streetlights flickered on, casting a soft glow on the sidewalk. Daniel hesitated before speaking. "You don't have to keep walking with me, you know?" Keanu shook his head. "Maybe I don't. But maybe I want to." Neither of them noticed the figure watching from across the street, a man in a dark coat. Holding a phone, his eyes fixed on Keanu and Daniel. He wasn't just curious. He was waiting for the right moment to step in. The figure in the dark coat followed them at a distance, his footsteps quiet against the pavement. Daniel didn't notice, too caught up in the strange comfort of walking beside Keanu. For the first time in months, he wasn't thinking about the long, empty hours ahead. He was just here, in this moment. Keanu, however, had a sense for when something felt off. Maybe it was years of moving through crowds unnoticed, or maybe it was just instinct, but he could feel eyes on them. Still, he didn't say anything. Instead, he slowed his pace, subtly adjusting their path toward a busier street. "You okay?" Daniel asked. "Yeah," Keanu said casually, though his eyes flicked toward a store window. Catching the reflection of the man behind them, they reached a small plaza lit by neon signs. Keanu stopped. "Mind if we sit for a bit?" he asked Daniel. Shrugged, and sat beside him on a low stone wall near a fountain. Keanu leaned forward, elbows on his knees, scanning the reflections in the glass doors of a nearby shop. The man in the dark coat had stopped too, leaning against a lamppost. Finally, the man walked toward them. His steps were deliberate, not rushed. He stopped a few feet away and said, "Mr. Reeves, can I talk to you?" Keanu straightened. "Sure," he said, keeping his tone neutral. The man glanced at Daniel, then back at Keanu. "I know him," he said, nodding toward Daniel. "He's not who you think." Daniel stiffened. "What's that supposed to mean?" The man's expression was unreadable. 2 years ago, he saved my life, pulled me out of the street when a car was coming. Never even told me his name. I've been looking for him ever since." Daniel blinked, completely caught off guard. "That was you?" The man nodded. "I owe you, big time." He looked at Keanu. "If you're with him, then whatever you're doing, count me in." Keanu glanced at Daniel, whose face was pale. With surprise, "You never mentioned that." Daniel shrugged awkwardly. "I didn't think it mattered." It matters, Keanu said firmly. The man in the coat handed Daniel a small card with his number. Call me if you ever need anything. Then he walked away into the crowd, leaving the two of them in stunned silence. You've been carrying this idea that you're invisible, Keanu said slowly. But you've already left your mark on people. You just didn't know it. Daniel looked down, his throat tight. I don't know what to say. Keanu smiled faintly. Maybe just start with thank you to yourself. As they stood to leave, Keanu's phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. It read, "You're about to find out why you met him." Keanu single quotes, eyes narrowed. Nice. He slipped the phone back into his pocket, but he knew this wasn't over. Was coming, and whatever it was, Daniel was now a part of it. Keanu didn't tell Daniel about the message right away. He walked a few more blocks until they reached the quiet street where Daniel's apartment building stood. The night air was cool, carrying the faint hum of traffic from far away. Daniel hesitated outside the door. Thanks for today, he said softly. I don't remember the last time I felt like someone actually saw me. Keanu placed a hand on his shoulder. I see you, and I'm not the only one. Daniel nodded, but there was still doubt in his eyes. Then he glanced down the street, his expression tightening. Do you see that? A black van had turned the corner, slowing as it approached. Its windows were tinted, the kind that didn't belong in this neighborhood. Keanu stepped slightly in front of Daniel, his senses sharp. The van stopped a few feet away, and the side door slid open. Two men stepped out, not rushed, but with a purpose. One of them spoke. Mr. Reeves, we need you to come with us. Keanu didn't move. Why? The man looked at Daniel. Because your friend here is in danger, and so are you. Daniel's eyes widened. What? Why me? The man pulled something from his jacket, a small folder. He handed it to Keanu. Inside was a blurry photo of Daniel, taken months ago, along with a printed note. Target for acquisition, high priority, acquisition, Daniel whispered, his voice shaking. The other man stepped closer. We're not here to hurt you, but someone else is looking for you, and they're not as polite. You saved the wrong person's life 2 years ago, and now you're on a list. You shouldn't be on. Keanu's mind was already working. Where do you want to take us? Somewhere safe, the man replied. Daniel looked at Keanu, panic in his eyes. Do we trust them? Keanu met his gaze. I trust my gut. And right now, my gut says we go, but I'm staying with you the whole way. The men led them into the van. As the door slid shut, Daniel glanced at Keanu. You could have just walked away. You barely know me. Keanu shook his head. Daniel, once you let someone know they're not invisible, you don't get to disappear on them. We're in this together now. The van pulled into the night, city lights blurring past. Daniel stared out the window, the weight of the unknown pressing down on him. But for the first time in years, he didn't feel completely alone. And somewhere deep inside, he realized the truth. Sometimes the people you meet by accident are the ones who end up saving you, not just once, but over and over again.